I found it interesting that the woman that Jarrah was interviewing is an actress.
Isn't she Stuart Rosa's granddaughter?
Yep.
Yes, Apollo 14, he was the command module pilot, right?
Yeah, she has a couple of shows that she's been in.
Well, it's interesting. She was quite a good interviewer. She came across very well, very presentable, very articulate. She knew what she was doing or trying to do. But I thought the shuttle astronaut, Mike Mullane, he didn't actually answer the questions. I didn't think the questions put to him were relevant for Apollo. They weren't even relevant for a shuttle. He was just coming from the point of view of saying, well, of course they did it.
He brought nothing to that interview. Nothing.
No, you're quite right. He didn't. Nothing at all. No new information, no discussion. He was just saying that Jarrah must be a complete fool to believe what he believed. The fact that Jarrah has spent decades looking into this stuff, that he's very knowledgeable about it. He's got degrees in it. He's done the research. He knows what he's talking about. He was very polite. He was very respectful, which maybe gave the impression that he was listening to what was being said and agreeing with it. No, that's not the way Jarrah works. He works by challenging people, and quite right too.
Well, I'm quite sure Mullane is well aware of what can and cannot be done in the space industry. And I'm sure he was practicing, in the water tanks and everything else with the suits on. And I'm sure he spent a bit of time at Felix and Paul Studios as well.
Yeah, but he's not going to say that in public now, is he?
Of course not.
So he is maintaining NASA's story, NASA's narrative. We landed humans on the moon. And he said that they had radiation detectors on the shuttle. Well, of course they did. That's standard procedure. But what did they read? What were the readings? Considering the shuttle never went higher than about 300 miles, it's not really a fair example of what Apollo experienced, because Apollo allegedly went 240,000 miles away from Earth. But that wasn't really brought up. The difference between the shuttle at altitude of 300 miles, or maybe a wee bit more in some cases, up to 400 miles, and the Apollo craft, which are maintaining 240,000 miles. Is there a difference? What difference in radiation would you expect at that level? Those questions weren't asked, let alone answered.
Well, one of the problems I have with any of the numbers that are given for radiation is they never give you the number outside of the craft. What's the real number outside of the craft? You can't find a PDF file on the detectors themselves on how they're calibrated. I did find one that was on the Orion that's saying that they had 5 different kinds of radiation they were detecting, but they only put in 3 of them. They didn't want to have alpha rays or cosmic rays. They just wanted to read the radiation from just 3 other kinds of radiation, right? Well, alpha and cosmic rays are the most deadly ones out there. Wouldn't you want the readings on those?
Of course you would. Yeah.
And you want them outside the craft. You can tell us how much the craft is protecting it. You can tell us how much the suits are protecting it. And you can tell us how much shielding you had to put over top of the radiation detectors so that they even work, that they don't just destroy themselves. And in 2014, they put a vehicle in there for 15 minutes into the lower band of the belts. And it's not running full time. Once a minute, it's taking a snapshot, just like a photograph. And then they're averaging that out using a computer to do the averaging. And then they turn around and they go, well, there's this much radiation, but we're going to recalibrate it to what the absorbed radiation, only a percentage of that. It's what the absorbed radiation is.
Yeah.
Right. But they don't tell you what it's being absorbed into. That's how they knock the numbers down. And then when they do it one more time, they're giving you numbers per hour. And then when they do a graph and it shows very little of it, it's because that's per minute. So you just divide it by 60 and it gets a whole lot less. I mean, that's what the serious problem is. And you realize that Orion, when it went up there at 500 miles, I mean, it lost all its cameras. They burned out. And the other 140 sensors on board the craft burned out. The only ones that kept operating were the battery operated radiation detectors, the birds, right? The one that Bart Zabrell went after and tried to get. And then you realize where they set them up. They put them in lead-lined closets full of sand and water to protect them inside the craft. They're in closets with a meter of sand around them and then filled with water in that chamber. And they only would take a snapshot once a minute.
Oh, this is really something. These two people are showing, they're displaying how it's going to function with these water bags. What they're doing is they're placing them on the wall. Now, don't forget, these are empty. These are just dummy bags. So they're not really placing them on the wall. But what they are doing is they're placing them all over the place on the floor. Then they get in between them, go down the hatch, and then grab the last four and pull them over top of them. And now they're hiding from radiation. Can you imagine this? They're hiding from all this cosmic radiation. And I show it penetrating right through that craft and out the other side.
Yeah, it will do. It has to be properly sealed. You can't just put bags of water and expect that to protect you.
So they're going to climb down a hole with water and put water bags over top of them. And they all get in there and just, what, suffocate?
Well, it would if it was sealed.
Yeah, well, let's face it. I mean,
oh my God.
Yeah, well, listen, if air can get through those little cracks in the bags, then imagine radiation, what that's going to do. It's going to go through faster than a hot knife through butter.
Yeah.
It's going to find its way in everywhere. I mean, you know, water, you have the tiniest little leak on a washer. I don't care where it is. That water's finding its way in. Can you imagine radiation? Look, like we're talking like nanometers. That's going to be going right through there, through you and out the other side. Just like we've shown on those spacesuits. Every time they X-ray, it doesn't matter what spacesuit, they X-ray a spacesuit, you can see the wall through the other side. And the Apollo spacesuits are the worst. How many times have we shown those X-rays repeatedly?
Radiation's getting a whole lot worse than it was in the 1960s.
Yeah, it's getting worse.
Yeah.
Oh,
it disappeared there. For 3 years, it just disappeared, right? Gravity disappeared a little bit so you can get the thrust to go, all kinds of shit. Yeah. Computers were so much better in those days.
Well, they were much stronger because they were made of pretty tough material.
They weighed 5 tons.
Yeah, 5 tons. I mean, now they weigh 5 kilos and they're made of electronic devices which are affected by radiation. So you've got to protect them. Are they protecting them? I don't think so.
Well, I would like to know where Roosa got the Artemis readings from, because I've looked everywhere and I cannot find them anywhere on Google searches.
I can't find those. Like the last ones I got was 2014 for Orion, right?
Yeah.
And you got to take those with a grain of salt. When you look at what's hitting the lunar surface and they claim that it's going through 9 meters, it's penetrating 9 meters into the ground, 30 feet into the ground. That's the Earth sitting there. And it's about the same if you're using water. It takes about that many feet of water to protect. Yeah. So how are you going to lift a column of water that's 30 feet of water all the way around you?
No, you're not.
You're not lifting that anymore.
Yeah, just imagine how heavy that's going to be. So much for payload specialists.
Yeah, well, it's about the same as if you put 2 feet of lead around them.
I wonder if what's happening now is that some of the modern astronauts who are going to go up on Artemis are starting to ask questions about radiation. What protection are we going to be given? What will our spacesuit have as protection from radiation?
This is a question that Ben asks Roosa. You know, and Roosa says, well, that's my specialty, right? And then he gives you reasons. Even those boron nitride nanotubes, he thinks that they're not going to be able to do the job 100% effectively or efficiently.
Yeah.
There's still going to be places where that radiation is going to get through. It's supposed to go around it instead of through it. Okay, we're looking at Bremsstrahlung. And what this word means is it means in particle physics is electromagnetic radiation produced by the deceleration of a charged particle when deflected by another charged particle, typically an electron, by an atomic nucleus. The moving particle loses kinetic energy, which is converted into radiation, i.e. photons, thus satisfying the law of conservation of energy. The term is also used to refer to the process of producing the radiation, ... according to Wikipedia, Bremsstrahlung. So what it's doing is it is actually deflecting the particles so they do not pass through. They slow them down. But like Roosa said, they're still going to get through at that high amount. When those particles are bunched up like that and they're just flying at you, some of them are going to get through.
Well, if you got 2 feet of them, if it's 2 feet thick, maybe it works.
It is the actual braking radiation. That's what that word pretty much means. Braking radiation is any radiation produced due to the acceleration, positive or negative, of a charged particle, which includes synchrotron radiation. And of course, the Birdie bunch will tell us we're wrong about that too.
Oh, they always tell us they're wrong because it's different types of radiation. That's what they're saying. If you want to protect humans from radiation, there are barriers such as lead, concrete, water provide protection from penetrating gamma rays. Gamma rays can pass completely through the human body. As they pass through, they can cause damage to tissue and DNA. And that's what you need to protect against.
Yeah, and if it's strong enough, you'll just go pop like things happen in a microwave when they explode. It's about the same thing, right? You concentrate it, things happen. And that's the same with any electronics on board. That's the problem. If they just can't have the suit, the entire craft has to be protected. And then they got these damn windows in them.
It doesn't.
And I keep going back. Did you ever notice that nobody ever makes a comment when I mention the windows? You'll never see that comments under there about the windows when you're talking about leaving the front door open and just letting the radiation flow through the vehicle. They just shut right down. And I'd like to know that guy that redesigned the command module. Now it's got stainless steel shell in it and everything else, right? Not visible in any of the construction of the machine, not visible in any of the diagrams, nothing, or any of the photographs. It's not there. There's no stainless steel anywhere in there. Maybe his Fisher space pen had some stainless steel in it. Who knows?
Interesting. Does rubber stop radiation? Does glass block radiation? Glass that include lead can substantially absorb gamma, X-ray and neutron radiation. So there's all sorts of possible answers, but are they accurate?
Yeah, but what kind of glass were they using in 1969? They've come an awful long way with automotive glass and bulletproof glass and everything else, right? The strength of them is just incredible in today's world compared to was 50 years ago. They barely knew how to laminate a windshield back then, right? And of course, you have ones that have filters in them for UV light and things like that for large buildings. They've developed all of that stuff, but that's not back in the Apollo era.
Now, interesting point here about gamma radiation. There are several nuclear suits, that's presumably for workers in nuclear facilities, that claim to offer protection against radiation. But these suits do not provide protection against gamma radiation.
Isn't that interesting?
So they might protect against some radiation in the same way that lead will protect against some radiation, but not all of it. Depends how thick it is.
Yeah, well, gamma radiation is the most deadly kind.
Yeah, exactly. And that comes from deep space, galactic cosmic rays.
From all directions.
Yeah, it's not directional. It's going all the way.
Yeah, that certainly could cause a problem for anybody in the space industry. It's an absolute showstopper for any extended time and space.
How does NASA shield from radiation, it says here? In general, the best shields will be able to block a spectrum of radiation, but not all. Aboard the space station, the use of hydrogen-rich shielding, such as polyethylene, is the most frequently occupied locations, such as the sleeping quarters and the galley, has reduced the crew's exposure to space radiation. But that's in the space station.
And you're still well below the Van Allen belts.
Of course you
You're
are.
not traveling through it, and you're not going past them. Like I said, it's been a problem. It's always been a problem. The vacuum's been a problem.
Yep.
The consumables have been a problem because there's only so much they can launch at one time.
During Jarrah's discussion with Mullane, the shuttle astronaut, vacuum was not mentioned once.
Yes, that's something. And I'm surprised Jarrah didn't bring that up.
Well, I don't think Jarrett's talked very much about vacuum. He's done an awful lot on radiation.
Yes, he has. Yeah.
Right? He's done an awful lot on the radiation. He did a lot with the rocket engines and stuff like that. But I don't think he's looked into vacuum the way we have.
No, I don't think so. I think your experiment with the vacuum chamber was very valuable. Despite it not being as hard as the vacuum we know exists on the moon, it demonstrated the problems that vacuum creates.
This is what people like the Bertie Bunch and their little clique of clowns seem to forget, is that if the hues and color balances are that far off in a little vacuum, what is it going to be like when you hit a hard vacuum like you would find on the moon? That's the point. And yet all they can say is, oh, you still took a picture. Well,
Yes,
yeah, it still took a picture, but why are all of NASA's so pristine and chromatic, and there's all the color balances there, and there's no blurring, and there's no outgassing, and there's nothing happening there. So come on, guys. Even look what Bill did. Bill used Tor 10 to the -6, and that was only in there for 4 hours. And look at what it did. It fogged it.
I think he only got it down to that for maybe an hour. When I talked to him, he said when he physically looking in the chamber, could visibly see the off-gassing occurring. That's when he stopped the test.
Yeah, well, you could see it. And it started, when you look at the meter, he looks at that and he goes down, and it's only at -1 when it started. I think when he saw the material outgas, he got spooked.
And when I was talking to him and I said, are you going to, throw some batteries and the pen in there and stuff like that? He said, I'm going to have to build a chamber just to put it in because he knows it's going to destroy the equipment. But then the pump itself is going to be damaged because you're looking at tens of thousands of dollars.
So if these Bertie Bunch laddies are so keen on demonstrating that we've got it wrong, why don't they do the same test themselves?
Yeah, put $100,000 up for the equipment to get down there.
Yeah, come on, guys. You're so keen on proving us wrong, and at least we've done the test. At least we've done the experiment. You haven't. You're just talking from perceived knowledge, which isn't necessarily correct. So come on, guys. If you want to demonstrate that NASA are telling the truth about vacuum, show us. Show the world that they are telling the truth. Don't just say it.
Yeah, and then they can verify that they bought the correct film. Because
Yes.
they claim we don't know what we're talking about. NASA has this special film.
Which NASA have never shown what it is. They claim it's a special film because it had a thin backing.
It was super thin to get 200 images on there, which means it's even more volatile to the vacuum.
Of course it does. Film has to be protected. And film is manufactured from a liquid which is dried. And when it's put in a vacuum, the properties of the film change, as we've demonstrated. The color balances go completely wrong.
It really is kind of sad when you look at those people, and they are so damned right all the time.
It's called confirmation bias, because they know they're right, because they saw it on TV, don't forget. And how can anybody dispute it? NASA are telling us these things.
That's the force of constant media. They don't have a launch pad yet. They just came back from an asteroid. They haven't got to Mars yet, but they can't get off the ground because there is no launch pad.
It's a bit sad, really, isn't it?
Oh, we're going to the moon in 2025. Ah, but we don't have a launch pad.
We're going to have to borrow one from the Russians, I expect.
It's all, Felix and Paul Studios is taking over. We don't need to spend the money on the launch pad.
No, we can do it on film. Everybody will believe it. We'll put it on television. Oh dear, oh dear. And they think we're going to believe all this stuff. The trouble is, a lot of people do. The Bertie Bunch believe all the stuff that they're told.
The Bertie Bunch. Speaking of the Bertie Bunch, Slack came over and left a comment. I was really surprised.
You see, all of that energy that's being released out here on this planet by our beautiful sun, creating life and everything else, it should have been slightly more selective. And then we wouldn't have the Bertie Bunch and all this other nonsense.
But the Bertie Bunch are true in what they say, that we're all idiots, we don't know what we're talking about. They believe that. Because if they didn't believe that, they'd know that they possibly had to question it themselves. If they start doing that, they're going to find out that we're right. Oh, that'll upset them. No more confirmation bias there, chaps. Come on, Bertie Bunch, get your act together.
Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous when people just don't wake up and see what the actual reality is. I mean, we are in our current and even our near future or future accomplishments going to have severe problems in space travel. People want to think that it's going to be a long-term ventures, that they're going to colonize the moon or Mars or anything like that. It's just not doable, because you would have to have daily launches to resupply. Right now, with anything they're doing, you can throw a satellite up there and a CME is going to take the damn thing out. You're going to have to just put another one up.
Yeah, that's what they do.
And that's what they do. And that's fine and dandy. It's just a 200-pound object or 100-pound object. It's not a big deal, right? But they're not reliable source of communication or anything else, because when a CME wipes them out and you got to replace them, there's going to be a time delay there, and you're not going to put up with that if your phone is working off that device. Just not going to happen. We won't put up with it. That's just like a power outage. And that's what the reality is. And then you go back and you see where all of the technology is going into in the underground cables right around the world, right? And you see that, right? It's not a big deal. It's billions of dollars a year being put into that and maintaining it and expanding it.
I like the comment about the guy who said that the special duct tape they used on Apollo 17, Cernan had a roll of duct tape with him to fix the mudguard on the buggy. That's the fender to Americans. This was special duct tape that can withstand much higher temperatures than the tape available on Earth. I believe it is only available to be purchased in certain hardware stores and corner shops on the moon. Great. What happens when it melts? It doesn't melt. It's on the moon. Oh, it's nice. Good comment, that.
This fella here, Jan, as far as the duct tape goes, the glue would have turned into goo and it would have not worked. The Captain tape, that tape's rated for vacuum and the temperature is minus 169 to 400 centigrade. It's special tape.
For use on the moon.
How come you can't buy it at your local hardware store? That is the thing. They claim all of these new materials and everything else, but they're not on the commercial market. The biggest one for me is, of course, the insulation that they claimed that was so good, right? 1 inch thick, and it holds the temperature within 1 degree over a 10-year period. Everybody would have the most efficient houses. Your heating bill would be down to nothing. What is it? Some kind of conspiracy? We just deal with facts, but that's a conspiracy.
Oh, some good stuff there.
Yeah, there's a few new guys on board chatting that are just off the wall.
Because, by the way, it did vanish. They don't have it anymore. The sunglasses pocket in the spacesuit, how come it's not in the diagram? Oh, it's still there, but it's not labeled. Yet everything else is labeled, from the boots to the gloves to the little trinkets on the uniforms to everything's labeled there, right?
I saw them when they took the image from the press kit that says sunglasses pocket. Yeah. And when it's reposted, if it's on Reddit or whatever, You can actually see where they did the whiteout on it to get rid of the sunglass. It just says pocket. You can actually see where they erased the sunglass off the thing when they put it in there. Just blocked it out because it's absolutely pure white instead of the scan, right? When it comes to something like the moon hoax, it's not a conspiracy. It's an absolute fact that it never happened. And that's what people really have a problem with. And just because it's written down, just because they advertise it, just because they claim it, doesn't mean that it's true. The physical facts demonstrate that it has never been done.
No, but there are plenty of people who try to claim that it has been done, and that's all they ever do. They claim it.
Be nice to start with a launch pad, wouldn't it?
Yeah. You have such launch pads stayed in one piece. Well, most of the Apollo launches stayed in one piece because you had a big flame deflector trench underneath it. Oh dear.
Actually, the Saturn V launches were probably the finest accomplishments that NASA had ever made. They didn't fail. They got off the ground. They got out of sight. That's all they had to do is get them out of sight. They didn't blow up. They didn't do anything else. That's one amazing feat, to put that size of a vehicle in the air. Like, it doesn't matter whether those rockets were running at 100% thrust or whatever they had to do to make them work without blowing up. Because I'm sure if they turned them right up what they claimed they were capable of, it would have ruptured the fuel cells alone, right? With the amount of vibration that's going through them. But they did a fantastic job for the media to convince people. That they were successful at.
Yeah, that's why I always claim that Apollo was a brilliantly executed propaganda exercise. Brilliant. We all believed it because NASA and its Never a Straight Answer and their accomplices, the clowns in America, had convinced us that Kennedy was shot by one person.
No, the video shows quite differently, doesn't it?
Oh, it does, yes. But of course, there can only be a conspiracy if more than two or more people were involved, and it demonstrates they were. So there was a conspiracy. Therefore, what's the answer? 60-odd years later, we still don't know. It's sad.
Well, it was definitely well planned.
Oh, it was very well planned.
And kept a secret. There's another secret that was well planned and kept a secret.
Oh dear. There's these ideas that 400,000 people who worked on Apollo, which they did, couldn't keep a secret. It's such a ridiculous comment to make because they didn't have a secret to keep. Nobody told them. Same as nobody told the rest of us that the whole thing was a fake.
Kennedy probably had 400,000 government employees working for him.
Yeah, they probably did. And they can't keep secrets, can they?
No, they can't keep secrets.
No. So the idea that 400,000 people couldn't keep a secret is such a stupid thing to say. It just demonstrates the inadequacy of thought behind people who claim that it was real.
Oh, but we have mathematicians that work it out. How long you could keep the secret for with so many people.
Yeah.
Like if so many people are involved, you can only keep it for this long, and you've got psychiatrists that are working it out. But these mathematician guys, where do they get the numbers from to start with? They just pull them out of the air?
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
I mean, and people believe that too.
There's a chap called Grimes over in the University of Oxford who produced that ridiculous story.
Yes, he was one of the first to really trigger a whole bunch of nut bars to come up with their own theories, wasn't it? On how long they could do this and that and everything else. He's also the guy that took the radiation numbers and made them down. He got them all the way to 0. He took it down farther, saying that there's actually more radiation on Earth than there was in space.
I'm sure he
I
believed.
looked at that and I thought, geez, if anybody believes you, I don't know where he got his title from, out of a Cracker Jack box or whatever he won a prize. I mean, the qualifications, like the arrogance, that's what he excels at, is arrogance.
You saw that presentation given by professor from the UK Space Centre who accused me of being ignorant about Apollo when he claimed that the radiation was only the equivalent of a couple of chest x-rays. Well, That's what he thinks, because that's what he read somewhere. It doesn't mean to say that he's researched it. But he gave me a lot of nice publicity, for which I'm very grateful. A lot of people have contacted me as a result of that and said, what do you think? So I told them. But I'm not rude.
Yeah, a couple of X-rays per second.
Yeah, I didn't say that. A couple of X-rays.
Yeah, a couple of X-rays per second. Or maybe if there's a CME, it could be 1,000 X-rays per second.
Oh, many more than that, yes.
Never mind the fact that that's the milder form of radiation, but when those gamma rays hit you, they rip you apart. Got to get your little EMF hat on, and then you'd be all right.